Dora comes from Slovenia, and if you don't know where Slovenia is, it's the top of the old Yugoslavia, which was smashed up.
We're not close to Russia.
Yes, no,
if anyone still thinks so, and there's no war.
It's the top of what used to be Yugoslavia, above Croatia and below Austria, and next door to a bit of Italy. Yeah. We held a team meeting there in the mountains, and we were introduced to some former partisans who fought the Germans in the Second World War, and one of them showed us a whole room full of skulls which he'd sniped during the Second World War, and he said they're back again. So that's from Slovenia. Now, Dora is going to talk about her own country and the problems there, and please listen carefully, because it's a different country to what we've been talking about so far. Dora.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, my name is Dora Debeljak. I'm from a small organization from Slovenia. So it's called June List, and we were originally we were based on the Swedish and the Danish June List or June movement, but then it developed into more of a promotion of also social services, development of healthcare, of course, which means that we're not featured in the media and we're not loved by the government. So what I also, just like the previous speaker said, it's wonderful that I'm the last, because they mentioned everything that I'm supposed to talk about, because Germany is our main economic and export partner, and this East Partnership is very much alive in my country. And also, since my grandfather was German, I also have a bit of a connection with this ideas. Basically, what I try to, I'm not a professional politician, just like everyone else. So I'm just going to discuss more from a personal point of view and from what we as a small organization actually can achieve from in our countries or elsewhere. As far as the euro is concerned, I think it's important to understand that probably you cannot envision, but when my country became independent, I was 11 years old. And my parents had dreamed of becoming independent since forever, and I was brought up as a Slovenian, never as a Yugoslavian. And throughout history, we learned to be submissive because we were a small country, and we were told that we're just supposed to work well and just listen to what the greater nations tell us. So this kind of mindset remained with us. So as soon as we became independent, we didn't focus on how we as a nation can now focus on building our own sovereignty, our own state. We were just focusing on how to get to another organization or master that will tell us what to do. This is ingrained in in our minds. I think it's probably hard for you to understand how this works, but this is something that is passed on from generation to generation. So even our most famous author, Ivan Cankar, said, you're servants and you will remain servants until the end of days, which is a bit of a morose statement, but it's true. So I remember that when we became independent, I was extremely excited because I thought, now finally we can create something from ourselves. But then, of course, as history told us from before, we were part of the Habsburg monarchy and Frankish monarchy. So it was hard. It was hard for the old generation. The younger one was excited, and we had the energy and the zeal to do something. But the older generation was just looking for another master to serve. So even though we got our own currency, our own policies, our own government, as soon as we could, we started to conduct negotiations to become a new member of the European Union, even though we had barely escaped Belgrade, and we've been a net donor to the other republics, as we were the most economically developed because of our connections to the West. And so after we became independent, at first it was a great shock. Because suddenly we had to improve our economy, because before everything was okay that we produced, and suddenly our old industry that was underdeveloped, our human resources were underqualified. So suddenly we were faced with the fact, that we're just this small country, and we're no longer a major player as we used to be in Yugoslavia, but suddenly we're this small, tiny country that nobody cares about. So suddenly we looked up to our big neighbor, Germany, as many Slovenians had emigrated to Germany in the 60s and 70s. It was those Gastarbeiters, as you may know. And so it was really interesting that suddenly there was the movement from Belgrade to Brussels. And then everything was put in motion by all the governments so that we could join the European Union as soon as possible. So when we held the referendum to join the European Union, the No movement, like my organization, we were not given any space by the media. We were not allowed to make any statement, or even if we were filmed, we had to force the national television, public television program that has it in its act of association that we should be allowed to be given a voice, that all sides should be given a voice. We had to force it from them that we were allowed to speak on television for half a minute at the 10 p.m. news, which nobody watches. And the main parties that were in favor of the joining the European Union could participate at the main debate held at 7 p.m., which is, of course, the main time to speak. And as soon as we became that poster child that we joined, and it was interesting that one of the reasons that we also joined the European Union was also because of fear. We were afraid because of Milosevic. We had already experienced the crisis with the Bosnian War, and we were afraid that another Serbian general or dictator would be coming after us. So we said, we need someone to help us. And suddenly it was, it was not that we wanted to join the EU as much as we wanted to run away from Serbia and from the East. And so when we joined the European Union, it was put in motion that we should be the poster child and to become the first of the Eastern European newcomers to join the euro. So we were not able to, for our economy was not allowed to develop organically, but they were forced to meet the Maastricht criteria in a matter of 1 year. I'm not sure how the finance minister did that, but suddenly the parameters changed in half a year completely. Suddenly we were Germany in a matter of half a year. And I said, we want to be the next Switzerland, but this is not the way to do it. And so there was no referendum, nobody was asked. Again, we were not given a voice. We were sending faxes, emails, we were trying to get to the media, nothing again. And so when we joined the euro as the first Eastern European country on January 1st, 2007. And then of course immediately things went downhill because before it was forced, everything was trying to be pushed into that mold of the Maastricht criteria, and suddenly we were there. And interestingly enough, what happened was the inflation went up, and the first thing that went up were the prices, because suddenly we had this fixed exchange rate, and it was €1 against $240, which is our previous currency. And suddenly we were not. Suddenly everyone, for example, before we could get a coffee for €0.50, and then they said, we had to make it so that it's rounded. So the coffee suddenly started to cost €1 on the 2nd of January. Well, it was on the 3rd because 2nd is a public holiday. So and suddenly prices went up, inflation went up, unemployment went up, and the government was forced to listen to the ECB for all kinds of policies. So we're not allowed, for example, before, if there was an issue with exchange rate, our central bank could intervene, or the interest rates could be changed, but now suddenly they were not allowed. Then state aid was no longer allowed because we became part of the monetary union. So many companies that were suffering from having to move from former Yugoslavia economy to Western economy, who needed the help and were in really endangered areas where the entire population of certain regions was depending on them. For example, you might have heard of Elan, the ski producing company. That company was given state aid before so that they could keep thousands of jobs in that region where only the skis were produced, and then suddenly the European Union and the ECB tell us, this is not allowed according to EU regulations, gave it back, and then it was sold to, I'm not sure, I think Russians or some others for a really low price, and I heard that there were several hundreds of people were sacked. And there was also, just like what has been already mentioned before, there has been more tension, not less tension than before. For example, Croatia and Slovenia before both of us joined the European Union, we were trying to get along, but now after we joined the European Union, now we're just fighting against each other who's going to be the better child of Brussels. And now suddenly with the refugee crisis, this is more prominent than ever because we are we're at the outside Schengen border now, defenders. But Croatia is holding upcoming elections. So whenever there's an election on either side of the border, they try to gain political points by promoting and inciting a greater tension between the two nations. And also after we joined the Euro, public expenditure went up, and also this net immigration that has been spoken before. I think only last year, 30,000 young, highly qualified people left the country, which for a country of 2 million people and where it's 800,000 active population, you can imagine how high of a number that is for us. And the only reason we are staying is because we don't know where to go. Yeah. It's not that I want to stay, and I'm a patriot, and that's one of the reasons I'm staying, but it's not because the economy is so great. And also because we're such a small country and because we're forced to do things as Germany tells us, because they're our main partner, we also were forced to introduce all sorts of austerity measures, also decrease the healthcare services, public services, because this is something that has been brought from the previous socialist communist country, this promotion of social values. This was something that I agree with, but this has been stripped off and stepped away. And ever since we have joined the European Union, I have found here an interesting table. Our net debt has risen by 20%, I think, and the net borrowing has been, before it was falling. It was almost to zero, and then now it's 15% of our GDP last year. And this also has to do with the fact that we cannot do anything about our policies and our employment. And also, of course, coupled with other historical reasons and other things that are also present in Slovenian politics, like nepotism and increasing public expenditure. But this is also has to do with Europe. And this is pretty much what I wanted to about the euro. I think that probably what John mostly wanted me to talk about is the refugee crisis, because suddenly Slovenia is in the headlines all over the world for all the wrong reasons. The refugee crisis pretty much started about a month ago. And as soon as we saw the first images on television, it looked like the Wild West, not our eastern border. There was I can show you here a few photos. These are real. These are photos from the eastern border. There's like a half a dozen policemen defending the EU, and thousands of refugees being transported from Croatia because Hungary had built a fence. Before Hungary had built a fence, most of the refugees traveled through Hungary to reach Austria and then Germany, which is the final destination of many of them, because they believe that, this is what my boyfriend heard at the border, that they were gonna get 1,500 euro social aid per person, and they're just gonna get jobs, on the street, and that BMW is gonna give them management positions. So he can, I mean, this is serious. And when I read recently that BMW offered 20 jobs for refugees, and they did not receive one single candidate met the even basic criteria to work for the really basic job. So this is how the refugees, they perceive this. And the first refugees started to arrive sometime in the middle of September, and against the agreement, which also has to do with the elections in Croatia, the Croatians were decided that they should just, because there were like 100 and 200,000 people already that they were brought from Greece and then from Serbia. These people are just pushed, just like all over Europe, like cattle. And suddenly they found themselves in Croatia. And the Croatians, we agreed with the Croatians that we cannot possibly, that we'll be overwhelmed by such an influx of people, that they should bring like 5,000 or 10,000 people per day. But because of their elections, they wanted to gain points. Suddenly they were brought during the night with a train, like 20,000 people, and then suddenly all these overworked, overwhelmed policemen, because we have only a small police force. We have only like 5,000 policemen. So yes, I'm going to move forward. And so the thing was that the police force was overwhelmed, and they could not. And also the local population became scared because at the beginning there was no army or nobody who could control where these refugees moved. So they would just sleep on the fields and they would just walk around and be in, and they would. It was disorganized. They had to get first volunteers to help with food, to help with registration. At the beginning, they didn't have any facilities where to register them, and many refugees told them they were born on January 1st, 1995, because this is what they've been taught, how to say in Slovenian apparently. And so it was really hard because the majority of these refugees were young men who were, they were aggressive towards these policemen. So first, the local mayor had to ask the Slovenian government first for several weeks to help out before the government reacted, so that at least the prime minister went down there and had a look how dire the situation is. And then the government asked Brussels for help, and then Juncker said, why can't they work it out between themselves? It's a local issue. What that has to do with the European Union? I mean, seriously, we are defending your borders. You allowed us to enter the European Union. You allowed us to enter the Eurozone. You allowed us to enter the Schengen regime. So please, And then so when the finance minister told him, we're going to have to spend 123 million euros just on the refugees alone, and we're also experiencing severe issues because, for example, tourists are already canceling their stays because they're afraid, that the refugees are going to attack them at ski resorts at the border. So now the tension has been increasing, and now things are finally slowly settling down. And there's also volunteers at the border helping out. There's also been food brought. So there's the media misconceptions that in some countries I heard that they've been told, that the refugees are treated badly, that they don't get any food. This is incorrect. This was created by certain far right groups from Slovenia who are now trying to get the army, who now has received powers to help out at the border, so that these incidents that have been happening at the border are decreased. And so now these refugees are brought in a more organized way to the Austrian border, but now we don't know what is going to happen in the future, because Germany and Austria are limiting the influx of people, because obviously they do not have any space anymore. Thank you.